Hey, Amanda.
Hi, Wendy. Welcome everyone to Coffee Talk Moms. And today with us, we have Emily Jamea. She's a certified sex therapist with Revive Therapy and Healing. Thank you so much, Emily.
Thank you so much for having me.
So tell us what you do exactly and how you got started.
Sure. So I'm a therapist, but I specialize primarily in sex and relationships. So most people who come to see me are dealing with an area or dealing with something in one of those two areas. So just like a therapist might specialize in eating disorders or in children and adolescents, I specialize in sex and relationships. Yeah,
Nice.
so it's a lot of fun. I enjoy it.
I have my first question is because, this quarantine, I've heard, there's been a lot of jokes that in 9 months, there's either going to be a lot of babies born or there's going to be a lot of people getting divorced. What can you say about couples and relationships in this time of quarantine?
So I know the romantic in all of us would love to see a ton of babies born after all of this is over, but unfortunately, the trend does not really seem to be going in that direction. I wouldn't be surprised if once things get back to normal that we then see a boom after that. But, the fact is that this has put a huge stress on a lot of couples, especially for couples where there's been a job loss and, we all, I think, are wearing like 15 different hats right now and are so fatigued at the end of the day. So sadly, I don't think couples are, rekindling the spark as much as we would like to think so. So it doesn't look like we're going to see a huge boom after the pandemic. But again, I think once things settle down again, maybe 9 months from that point, we'll see something. And sadly, it does look like the divorce rates might be going up a little bit. Probably for the same reason that people are postponing having children. I think that especially for couples who were already experiencing conflict, going through something like this tends to really exacerbate the conflict. So suddenly they're having to spend 24/7 in the same house and they can't really escape those problems. They don't have their normal outlets to relieve stress, whether it's, their workout class or friends or their career. And so that, has put a lot of stress on relationships.
Yeah.
So Emily, what made you want to be a sex therapist?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I was very lucky in that I grew up in a very sex positive household. My father's an OB/GYN, so sex was never really a taboo topic for us growing up the way it is for a lot of people. And I realized over time that I was kind of the one my friends came to for advice on things. And I think part of that was just because I was comfortable talking about it when a lot of people weren't. And then when I was in college, I was studying psychology and I took a human sexuality elective. And I was just hooked. I think that our sexuality is so intrinsically wound up in who we are. You can't really separate the two. And it affects and is affected by so many aspects of our psyche and, of course, our relationships. And so for me, it's kind of like a window to the soul. And it's such a rich source of information into relationship dynamics as well. So once I took that course, I said, that's what I think I want to specialize in. And the rest is history. Yeah, I've been focused on it pretty much since the beginning.
I love that. I actually did take that in college as well, but it didn't stick with me as much as some of the other ones. But I remember that was a really interesting class. And I remember watching different films and reading different books. And
Yeah. And I think, especially living where we do here in Houston, there's still so many conservative values, I think, that, make people feel uncomfortable with the idea of their sexuality. Also, Houston especially is such a multicultural city. So I love the opportunity to work with people from all different backgrounds and find out how that informs their own personal values around their sexuality and their relationships. So I think especially given where we live geographically, it's been a really interesting and fulfilling journey to help people who struggle.
I was going to say, yeah. So you probably see people from all different religions and backgrounds and upbringings. And so you have to.
Everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's been great.
One question I have, and you're a mom, how do couples who have been together for, years, maybe even like a decade, is it possible to refresh that love life? And then, or what if, you have young kids? How do you recommend handling that?
Sure.
And is it possible,
Definitely. And yeah, as a mom, I mean, I get it. I'm right there with everyone else who's trying to balance like work and kids and partner and personal and all of our other obligations. It can feel like a lot. And the good news is that when we look at couples who say that they have like optimal sexual experiences, so this goes beyond just kind of your ho-hum ordinary sexual experience. This is like top line sexual experience. Couples who possess certain qualities, which I'm actually writing a book about all of this. So I hope everyone will follow me to kind of stay up to date on that. So that they report sex gets better with time. And I'm a strong believer of that personally. I think, as I've applied a lot of the principles to my own life, think that when we stay in touch with some of these qualities, like our own sensuality, the degree to which we are flexible and willing to adapt in our relationships, the degree to which we're attuned to our partner, those sorts of things can definitely take sex to the next level, and even more so with time. And I think that it's important to remember, of course, for people who are in long-term monogamous relationships, the sex is going to ebb and flow over time. And when you have young children at home, that tends to be a period where couples can struggle a little bit. And so that's very normal. But I think as long as you really prioritize it, and if you have a healthy sexuality, we're finding that people tend to report it gets better. Part of that is because you have so many more shared experiences and sex becomes so much more meaningful. I think that in the beginning of a relationship, everything is very intense and it's very kind of driven honestly by neurochemicals. It's why they call it falling in love. It's like a very passive, chemically driven process. And when the intensity fades and that begins to transition into intimacy, a lot of people jump ship. They think that, well, this means the flame is extinguished or the fire is gone. And if you're willing to kind of ride the wave and stay committed to each other and reframe, I think, the way you think about sex, it becomes more intentionally motivated, which is in and of itself very intense, because it has an intimacy now that it didn't in the beginning. So the short answer to your question is that yes, I do think that it can get better, not just refreshed over time, but in fact a lot better over time.
Yeah.
That's great. That's good to know, because I know that there are those like sex hormones or those chemicals that that you can, I guess, when people first meet, it's like a high, and then when they stop, producing, or I don't know the right, that people jump ship. So
yeah, and so it becomes less of a passive and more of an active process. Right. But I think a lot of people don't know or don't have the tools to maximize the potential in that process. And so, part of my mission is in teaching those tools and giving people the resources so that I don't think you have to look outside the relationship for that intensity. I think that there's so much within us and within our relationship that we can draw from if we know where to look and how to apply it.
Oh, wow. And then Emily, there's a myth out there that says that you can eat a certain kind of food to increase your sex drive. Is that true?
So fun. I mean, I think the research is kind of out on whether or not there truly is an aphrodisiac effect with some of these foods. But if you remember just a minute ago, one of the components I mentioned was staying in touch with your senses, and eating is such a sensual experience. And the experience of eating something like oysters, which is, people say is an aphrodisiac, it's kind of an experiential process, something that you're sharing in. You can't really do it passively. You're not going to shoot an oyster while you're distracted on your phone. You have to be engaged and in touch with your senses while you're enjoying that oyster, and then reflecting on how the memory of the sea is now in your mouth. And, it's more, there's more to it, I think. And so, I think if we take that same principle and apply it to when we're engaged in other activities that require a higher degree of sensuality, that we can have the same intense effect. And that energy can translate into our sexual experiences. And that's what my research, my own academic research has found as well, that the more in touch we are with these qualities outside the bedroom, like sensuality, like curiosity, like our willingness to adapt to new situations, then the more easily we can apply them inside the bedroom. So again, it's not always about like learning new techniques or, you know, the kind of stuff you read in Cosmo. It's a little bit more holistic than that.
That's interesting to hear.
Great.
People always think you have to try something new and trendy and
No,
buy a new
no,
lingerie or,
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
put the red lipstick on because it was, you know, red lipsticks associated with being sexy and, you know, all that kind of stuff.
You know, that kind of stuff can be fun. There's nothing wrong with that. But there are so many ways to bring like a sense of novelty into the experience rather than like a material, something that's material, if that makes sense.
Sounds like you're saying to use your imagination as well. Like, you know, if you're eating an oyster and you're visualizing the sea, or you're visualizing like this romantic, you know, situation, you can bring that.
You make an excellent point. I think that so many people are guilty of reducing sex down to like a function of the body. And we have this entire brain that a lot of animals don't have. And so we have so much more capacity to draw on our curiosity and our imagination and that sort of thing. And we can use that to enhance our sexual experiences in a way that is, it's always accessible, it's free, and doesn't require batteries.
Right. Great. So when you coach, or, you know, if it's when your clients, if it's a couple and men and women are so different, the way that we're wired, how do you work with them? You know, what it's like my idea or whatever from, you know, genetics or biologicals, that the men, you know, their mission is to spread their seed, and then the women's mission is to find the perfect partner who's going to, you know, be the best person to raise a family. How does that come into play?
Sure. So there are some differences between men and women. Of course, there's exceptions to every rule. I don't like to generalize too much. But I really think that culturally, and not just in our culture, in many cultures, we are either directly or indirectly taught that women's sexuality is for a man, right? And that, you know, for men, it's just so automatic and their desire is high and their drive is high. And I think that, you know, that's also in part due to just gender socialization and, you know, historically the need to like control female sexuality because there seemed to be a lot more mystery behind it. And so this goes back, you know, thousands and thousands of years. But I think we're living in a time now where women are finally starting to own their sexuality and finding their sexual voice. And we're able to be so much more sexually assertive. And so we're finding a greater equality these days in men's and women's sexual satisfaction. But when it comes to couples, when there are differences, like in how we experience desire, I spend a lot of time educating people, not on how to change those differences, but on how to work with them. Because I think that, especially in couples where there's like a higher desire and a lower desire partner, usually the lower desire partner is pathologized as being the one with the problem, and they just need to go to therapy and get fixed so that they're on the higher desire plane. And it doesn't work like that. You know, you have to think very systemically. And I always look at, you know, what is the higher desire partner doing or not doing that might be contributing to, you know, the lower desire partner not wanting sex as much? Is the quality of the sex very good? Are they, you know, pulling their weight around the house? I think, you know, especially like in heterosexual couples, oftentimes like that invisible workload falls on the shoulders of women. You know, we're the ones thinking, did I sign my kid up for ballet class? Have I registered them for summer camp? There's like this, you know, never ending list, you know, that a lot of male partners don't often think about. And so I think by educating both on little changes they can make, then we can really narrow the gap, and that helps people feel more mutually satisfied.
That's good.
Yeah.
So a mom with, and there may be an answer out there for this or not, but a mom with kids and a family, and doing all of these things that you're saying, which is most of what our moms and dad, you know, most of what households look like nowadays. What are 3 tips you would give that mom on how to increase her sex drive?
for moms on how to increase their sex
Yeah.
drive?
With
Yeah.
kids, you know, just a busy household, to-do list, carpool, the whole nine.
Sure. So I think the number one thing is to take some time for yourself. You know, I think as women, we're so driven by our relationships with other people and maintaining our friendships, and have we organized this or that social group, and especially if we're having a career and taking care of the kids on top of all of that, I just don't think that we realize how kind of high strung that makes us. And it's really hard to flip a switch and go from like go to okay, now I'm relaxed and in the mood for sex. It just doesn't work like that. And so you want to really think about what you can do on a regular basis realistically to help you unwind. So that would be number one, is to make sure that you take some time for yourself. And that can be something like, you know, getting a massage once a week, or it might just be something a little you know, easier to work in, like a 10-minute bath before you know, relax to get in bed later that night. So just carving out that time where you can really disconnect from everybody else and just be in touch with your body is huge. And then I think it's so important to communicate with your partner about what you need to help you get in the mood. So we all have things that are sexual turn-ons and sexual turn-offs. And what we know is that it's more important to minimize the turn-offs than it is to find things to turn our partners on. Okay. So a male partner might think that by, you know, bringing home flowers and, you know, making a great dinner reservation and having good conversation, like they've, you know, all the stars are aligned, so you're going to be in the mood to have sex. But if there are too many things that are on the brakes, you know, like there's too much stacked on your to-do list, or you're too fatigued, or you're too stressed for some reason, it doesn't matter what the turn-ons are, the turn-offs can weigh a bit more heavily. So women, I think it can be really helpful to make a list of both, like what are your turn-ons, what are your turn-offs, and then share that with your partner and say, focus less on the turn-ons and more on removing some of the turn-offs. That's going to have a more powerful effect. And then the third tip I would give is to own your sexual pleasure. I mean, I alluded to this a little bit earlier, that I think a lot of women especially are socialized to think that sex is for a man. A lot of times the sexual experience ends with the male orgasm. And that kind of thinking and behavior can really minimize or even delegitimize female sexual pleasure. So it's so important to learn your body and find your sexual voice and learn how to communicate your likes and dislikes and preferences and that sort of thing to your partner. Because if the sex isn't very good, you're not going to want to do it. So think about what you need to make the sex better quality sex.
This is good. I'm taking notes, so that's why.
Yeah, right. So to summarize, you know, find your sexual voice, know what gives you pleasure, remove as many turnoffs as you can, and learn to communicate all of that with your partner.
That's good.
That's great. I didn't really even think of the turnoffs. Yeah, if the list is, you know, too high on the turnoffs, and definitely having that, I think you said earlier, that segue, you can't just flip a switch. So if your mind is going a million miles an hour, you have to have that time to kind of unwind.
Yeah. I mean, our nervous systems biologically have not caught up to how we live our lives these days. I mean, we go from one thing to the next. And so we're like in this heightened state of anxiety. And when our nervous systems are in overdrive like that, it sends a signal to the body. If we're thinking evolutionarily, now's not a good time to reproduce. I'm not gonna send the signals that'll help you get into the mood. So and that's something I think a lot of people have found during this pandemic, that there's so much power in slowing down. And people are finding a lot of positive benefit to not being able to do a lot of the things that they were before. So I hope this is one of the many lessons that we take away from this. You know, maybe you don't have to schedule your kid in 10 different activities. Maybe one is fine.
No, that I know. I really noticed I was packing on so many things for myself and for the kids. It's
too much. We need that time to unwind.
Right. Well, thank you so much. And this is all in your book as well.
Will be. Yeah, definitely.
Book that you're writing.
Yes.
I can't wait to read that. That's
great.
I'm
excited.
And then invite you back to do a book club on it as well.
Yeah.
So, that we
Oh,
can
yeah.
dialogue. So absolutely.
I would love that. Thank you. No, it was great talking with you ladies. I hope.
Yeah, I appreciate it. We'll have everything linked below. And if there's any questions that any of our readers have, they can reach you either by commenting or via your link. And thank you so much for watching. And we'd also like to have the viewers let us know what else you would like to hear us speak about. We're open to suggestions. So you can go to coffeetalkmoms.com and subscribe on YouTube and follow us on Instagram. Thank you. Bye for now.